welcome and good evening to The Truth is Simple. I'm Dave Corbin, your host. Today is December 5th, 2023, and this is episode 13, part 2 of First Amendment. If you got a chance to watch last week's episode, we talked about the very beginning of the First Amendment, the United States Constitution. This week, we're going to pick up where we left off, and let me bring that up, where we left off last week. So here is the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And that is what we talked about mostly last week. So if you have not seen that, I would stop this video here, go back, watch that other video, and then jump back in right here and watch the rest of this one. So with that said, today we're going to talk about the next little section, or abridging the freedom of speech. We're going to pick up the press and the other, hopefully in part 3 of this episode, of this discussion. And I didn't think it was going to take 3 parts to do this, but it did. I have quite a bit of stuff in front of me right here. Look, I'm looking at as I'm trying to look at you as well. So we're going to do our best to get through this in the next 10 to 15 minutes and then move on so you guys can enjoy the rest of your evening or day. But we're going to talk about the abridging of freedom of speech. So when we talk about abridging of freedom of speech, what does abridging mean? It has several different meanings. If you go into the dictionary and you look that word up, I did find something that talked about constitutional part, what this is discussing, and that means to limit or curtail. So basically make a rule or a law against freedom of speech. And I kind of gently rewrote using the words from the first 2 sections up at the top of the First Amendment there. And this is what I came up with. So, Congress shall make no law respecting or prohibiting the freedom of speech. Bam. Took out the abridging, but used just the regular part that was on the top. If you look at that up on the top, shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion. So I took that, respecting, or prohibiting the freedom, or prohibiting the freedom of speech. So there you go. That's basically what it says. Take the abridging out and just put the link of the parts to it. If you remember, on December 15th, 1791, the first 10 amendments were ratified by Congress. At that time, you got to remember what the people were like back then. Not as well educated as we are today. That's a big debate. maybe we are better educated, maybe we're not, right? We'll save that one for a later date too. I'm a teacher, right? So all you got to do is look at the numbers out there, and that would be a big debate. maybe we're worse off today than we were back then. But New England states basically had about a 90% reading and writing ability at that time, whereas the southern states were somewhere around 54 to 62% is what I found, and that was just in the Virginia area. So if you went to some of the other states in and around Virginia, in the southern areas, that might have been actually lower. So anyway, you could see that it was kind of broad, from a 90% down to about a 54% as far as people being able to read and write. When I looked at what was happening as far as the First Amendment, of course, I'm going to look up case law. I want to see what the Supreme Court has said about freedom of speech. What rulings have they made? What judgments have they made? What cases have gone to court? What have they established as the precedent for what freedom of speech entails? Because if you just look at that, I mean, it can cover anything from me talking to you right here to anything I type and write on the internet or anywhere else, any signs or banners I make, any videos or anything I make like that. What is freedom of speech? Where does it stop? Where does it start? That type of thing. Well, the first thing I could really find was a case law that came in regards to a couple socialists back in the 1900s, Charles Schenck and Elizabeth Baer. They were both convicted under the 1917 Espionage Act for mailing leaflets encouraging men to resist the military draft. So that law was not on the books until they and probably others were doing this type of thing, saying, hey, it's against the 13th Amendment of the United States, which talks about slavery and involuntary servitude. So If I didn't want to work for somebody or I owed them money, there's other methods of getting the money out of me. I don't want to work for you. And they were saying that being drafted into the military, if you did not want to go because of the 13th Amendment, you did not have to go. So that could be a major issue for a country that's trying to get soldiers to go fight a war, right? As they were at that time, World War I. So Charles and Elizabeth were both prosecuted and both convicted of the 1917 Espionage Act. They appealed that conviction to the Supreme Court, and Justice Holmes, who I don't know if he was the Supreme Justice at that time, but he made the writing as to why they upheld the conviction on these two, and he basically said that during wartime, there's a special issue that kind of suspends to some aspect, is what he said. If there's a fire in a building, if you're in a theater and there's a fire somewhere, so that's where that comes from. If you ever heard it. If you're in a field, in a building and you yell fire, theater, you can't do that. You'll send fear and shock up people. They'll start screaming and running over each other, killing each other, knocking each other down. People will get hurt seriously, and so forth and so on. You can't say you're protected by free speech with what could happen to so many other people by lying or saying it in spite to hurt somebody or many people. So that's basically what he said, and this was what he kind of came up with. If it was under a clear and present danger at that point of time when you're making a comment or stating something, that it wouldn't be free speech. You can't say something that's to the detriment of others and around you. In this instance, he used clear and present danger. Little did he know that several years later, in 1919, so just 2 years later, a second president would be coming before him, and he would have to make an amendment to basically what he said. That clear and present danger became this. And basically it says, he wrote, clear and present danger, it was inappropriate in this case, and he changed his phrasing that said basically, speech that produces or is intended to produce clear and imminent danger, that it will bring about forthwith, right now basically, certain sensitive evils or substantive evils that the United States unconstitutionality may seek to prevent. So he says basically, he modified it, he changed it for this other case to say clear and present danger wasn't quite there. And that happens a lot, if you think about maybe some of the things you've done in life, and hindsight's 2020, right? Just like I brought up last week when we talk about church and state, that is not in the Constitution. That was in a letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote to a church, a Baptist church in Connecticut, I believe it was, to redress the state of Connecticut, who was going after them because the head of their church was basically the King of England, who they had just won a Revolutionary War against, right? So that's what we're talking about right here. It's kind of the same thing. You write something, kind of lingers and stays forever, that clear and present danger. Now he rewrote it to say this, and it kind of fell into the same thing, right? So he moved from that, and there was one more rewriting of it to where we are kind of today. And that happened in 1969 with the Brandenburg versus Ohio. That case basically changed what we see right here, that long version of it, to basically this. So what might be imminent and a lawless action. So if it qualifies under that today is basically where free speech is cut off. If you say something again that could cause something that would be imminent and lawless to happen or occur, that is no longer free speech. So as you go back to some of these things, I can remember Chuck Schumer saying something to the Supreme Court justices not so long ago that maybe he's protected because he's a senator and he's the head senator in the Senate. But if he can do it, why can't everybody else do it too? It happens quite frequently. I hate to say on the left side, but more on the left than it does on the right. All you got to do is pay attention, listen, and figure it out. Is what they're saying imminent and lawless? You listen to some of these things that are going on right now, these rallies that are pro-Palestinian. I don't know how they could take from the river to the sea and say that might become an imminent and lawless action. But if violence occurred, then that term in and of itself could be determined to be a violation of the freedom of speech. There you go, right? Just like that. It's done. When I started to look at some of this other stuff, I said, well, how does written speech fit into this? And I couldn't really find anything from the Supreme Court that really deals with written. Maybe as I review more of the press side, so the press's freedom of speech, as I look at that, perhaps something will pop up and I will find something in that area for them. But some of the things, let me just go over. I have 5 items that I found that they're kind of vague, but 5 things that come as freedom of speech things. One is not to salute the flag. That's West Virginia Board of Education's versus Barnett in 1943. So you don't have to salute the flag. That is, I guess, your choice of freedom of speech. Wearing black armbands to school to protest a war. Students do not, they don't lose their constitutional rights at the gate. So this is Tinker versus Des Moines in 1969. So some students were wearing black armbands because they were against, probably at that time, the Vietnam War. And so the government says they could wear them. That's their freedom of speech. They're in protest, but they're not really saying anything. They're not violent. There's no imminent threat of danger or anything. They're just saying that they don't support the war and they're against it. So they upheld that was freedom of speech. Number 4, did I do this one? Number 3, let's do 3 first. The use of certain offensive words, I don't know what certain offensive words might be, and phrases to convey political messages. So Cohen versus California in 1971. That's something that's probably going to be on a case-by-case basis. And is it going to hit that imminent unlawful action thing? Is it going to be imminent lawless action if there's some lawless action that comes from those words and so forth and so on? Then it's not going to be recognized as freedom of speech, even if the person who is saying it didn't think it was going to create that. If it does create that, then possibly, bam, they're going to get hit with some kind of lawsuit or something, sued or arrested. Number 4, contribute money to a political campaign. Buckley versus Vallejo in 1976. I didn't look into these cases to see what they were actually about. Number 5, to advertise commercial products and professional services with some restrictions. Again, it's not clear as far as what they're doing, but this case was against the Virginia Board of Pharmacy versus the Virginia Consumer Council. So there must have been something in there that talked about branding maybe, or something in there that somebody had the right to a certain set of words or something like that, or whatever it might be. Again, I didn't look into that to see exactly what it meant. And then number 6, to engage in symbolic speech. And they use flag burning here, but I guess that would be symbolic. I personally couldn't see doing that to my country, and I don't know what it would take for me to burn the American flag. I can't think of anything, because the flag represents the country, the Constitution, and who we are as a nation, and our reflection upon the world as one, if not the only, and that's debatable now, free nations left in the world. Anyway, burn the flag. I guess you could as a protest. That's Texas versus Johnson, 1989, and the U.S. versus Eichmann in 1990. So that one went twice to the Supreme Court. Maybe they thought they were going to get a better deal with a new justice that got appointed on the board or on the Supreme Court or something, or not. All right, so we did the 6, which includes freedom of speech. Let's do 6 that freedom of speech does not include. So these are not included as freedom of speech. So if you get caught doing one of these, it's most likely going to be illegal, and you could be arrested for it, put in jail. Okay, depending on where it goes. To incite imminent lawlessness. That's actually with the goes back to Brandenburg right there, and that's what it says. Brandenburg versus Ohio in 1969. Number 2, make and distribute obscene materials. And I'm not exactly sure what that is, but the only thing that I could really find that was probably more places than one was child pornography. That's Roth versus the U.S. in 1957. So I'm not sure what other than child pornography would fall into that. So just be careful on that one. And I hope you know that it's illegal to post that stuff on the internet. So young kids and whatever, you're taking pictures, and do not post that stuff on the internet. That is not free speech. That's jail time. Not an attorney, so take that as it is. Number 3, burn draft cards as an anti-war protest. That's the U.S. versus O'Brien in 1968. So don't burn your draft cards. We haven't had those in a while. I don't think we had a draft since I think it stopped in 73 or 4, maybe 75. I know that Vietnam ended in 75. So probably stopped somewhere in that ballpark. Maybe it was a little bit after the end of the war, so 76, after the war was totally done. So did the draft. It ended. But all of us boys, all of us guys have to register for the draft when we turn 18 and do that. Number 4, permit students to print articles in the school newspaper which is opposed by the school's administration. Hazelwood School District versus Kuhlmeyer in 1988. So if you have a school newspaper, and I don't know if your administration gets to oversee or look at it prior to its print and handing out or sending out to everybody, the school administration has the final say as to what goes into a school newspaper. It doesn't say here if it's only at K through 12 schools, or elementary through high schools, or if this includes colleges and universities. I do not know. Maybe it says in the case, so if you look up the case, maybe it will say that or not. But I would assume that from what I've read here, it would include colleges and universities. So read the law, read the case, and find out if it includes them or not. Number 5, students, obscene speech at a school-sponsored event, and that was Bethel School District versus Fraser in 1986. So at school events, you're limited to what you can say. So it probably has to go through the school's administration to make sure that it's okay. Number 6, students to advocate illegal drug use at a school-sponsored event. That's Morris versus Frederick in 2007. So there you have it, the 6 for and the 6 against. Several things there about schools, right? So you do have, it says up front, you can wear armbands at school. You know, that's okay. You're professing your freedom of speech, but you can't write something that the school district doesn't, or the school administration doesn't approve in the paper. You can't use obscene speech, and you can't promote drug use at the school. So there you go. Same for the universities. I don't know if these covered universities or not. I didn't look that deep into it. So you might want to check that out for yourself. Written speech. Okay, so is written speech covered under the First Amendment? You have to think back in the time when these were written, the amendments were written, 1780s, 1791, when they finally get ratified. How many people could write? How many types of printing presses were out there? There weren't any typewriters. There was no internet. So very few people were writing things. You had to be a scholar. You had to be a newspaper person or something like that to actually probably do much writing. Maybe writing letters to and from your family or friends or whatever that have moved away or are in the army or whatever. That might happen quite a bit. But you just don't know, okay, how many people were writing at that time. Today, everybody writes everything. In fact, I could be talking in right here, and I could be dictating in a script printing up on my computer. There is not one printing on my computer of this conversation I'm having with you. But, you know, would this be freedom of speech? If I took the print that I just spoke and put it on the web and posted it somewhere, I'm a single citizen. Well, I have my own video production company. So am I Am I justified to be basically, and this is something we'll probably talk about next week, am I part of the press? I would say, okay, yeah, because I have my own company and I do video production, I do write stuff and so forth, and post blogs and vlogs and all those that type of stuff on the internet. I would be covered. But you're posting stuff on TikTok. Is that actually yours, or are you giving it to TikTok? It's probably more theirs than it actually is yours. Once you post it out there, you could delete it off yours, but it stays on theirs server forever. So written speech, that's strange. The only thing I could really find was from the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee that comments that pure speech, based upon the Supreme Court's past comments, there's no precedent, so this is just somebody saying this. So take it with a grain of salt. They have upheld that the First Amendment protects a wide variety of expression, including written, that is typed and published. So if it's typed and printed and passed out, what does published mean? As soon as I hit the enter button on my computer and it posts somewhere, I would say that's published, but that's my interpretation, right? If I never actually hit the print button, but it's on my computer, is it published? Does it have to go out to a public for the public to see it to be published? Can anybody publish anything, or do you have to be the press? I couldn't find it. Maybe you can do your own investigation. I couldn't find anything on written speech. So remember back when they wrote this, there was only very few written speech. You had few books out there on the marketplace. It took a lot for books to get printed back then. It was quite the effort. And they didn't do vast quantities of them like they do now. And then, most people wrote letters, sent it in the mail, U.S. mail to their friends, spouses, or whatever, or letters, or had it delivered through a courier system of some type other than the U.S. mail. And then there was just people that were in the schools, scholars and stuff in the universities that actually probably did most of the writing back in those days. So today it's totally changed. It's flipped upside down. So there's going to have to be some kind of ruling eventually from the Supreme Court on that. What's covered under the written free speech. Let's see. All right, I think I covered everything. I know you probably don't feel like you learned anything. It's out there. The only people that can make decisions as far as free speech for any of us is the Supreme Court. Some kind of lawsuit has got to be filed. I don't know how that would come to them civilly. If it's a company versus a company, like I said on one of these items that I have listed there, maybe it was a company and somebody broke their trade, or certain comments or groups of words are phrased in a certain manner, and they're actually, believe it or not, they are actually become the property of a company or someone because they take those groups of words, and I forget where they file them, but they file them with the federal government. That makes it basically their property. And if you used those same words after they got the government's approval that they own that, then you could be sued for it. Your freedom of speech may or may not be covered by that. The Supreme Court may not say anything about it. They may not care anything about it. But it's something that will have to be a criminal action of some type, kind of like for George and Elizabeth on their Espionage Act conviction in 1917 would have to go before the Supreme Court before something like that kind of gets debated and sorted out. Hasn't happened yet. So anyway, that's where we are. Freedom of speech. Be careful what you say, what you do. What about all the free speech they have at the colleges and universities? You hear of a conservative, generally conservative, going to a liberal college or university somewhere in the States, and they get protested out before they even have the opportunity to speak. Well, they have the right to speak if they want to stand out on the street and hold that that speech or that comment. I mean, the speaker, if they want to stand out on the street and do it in public square, they probably could. If the college or university blocks them, as long as they're not on university property and they're on city property and they're not creating any imminent action of threat or death or anything. If there's a group that's protesting it and they come off and then go after that group that's moved their little convention from the university to maybe a town square or a park or something like that. There we go. See, something like that may eventually happen, and we'll see if it does. If I'm going to speak at a college or university and I got pushed off, I might have a backup plan saying, hey guys, send out a text. Hey, we're all going to this park 5 miles away from the university and we're going to have our little shindig there, our little talk there, right? Come on out and bring a lawn chair and we'll talk and we'll go from there and see who shows up. If I do that because I said that and others other than my group come and imminent danger is going there, is that free speech by me? Now illegal speech, not free speech, because I said something and it incited a riot or people from another group to come there. Am I at fault? Did I just lose my free speech? Bam, I don't know. See how messed up this is? Yep. So free speech is out there. Next week we're going to talk about what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about freedom of the press and maybe the right of the people to peacefully assemble and to petition the government for a redress or of grievances. So we're going to try to finish that up next week. And then Christmas is here. I may skip Christmas to New Year's week and come back strong in January with some new topic or something we're going to talk about then. We'll see what hits the news because it's all over the place. Stuff happens every day, and it's like I could do the show I couldn't do it. Yeah, I could do it every day, but I don't want to do it every day. So with that said, you guys have a great week. Have a great Christmas holiday. I'm going to say Christmas holiday because it is Christmas. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, and make the best of the last 3.5 weeks of 2023. Take care, and we'll see you next time.